Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Soul Food Poetry Night. I'm Michael Dillon Welch. We've been running this series for 9 years, and we're very glad to have you here. If you haven't yet signed up for our open mic, there's a sign-up sheet down here, and we have a monthly question. And this year it's what is your favorite musical instrument? So if you signed up already and didn't answer that question, add that answer now, and there's time to sign up later. I'd like to begin by reading a poem by Jenny Jacobs. It's called, "When I'm Old, I Shall Wear Purple." That's coming. When I am an old woman, I shall wear purple with a red hat that doesn't go and doesn't suit me. And I shall spend my pension on brandy and summer gloves and satin sandals and say we've no money for butter. I shall sit down on the pavement when I'm tired and gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bells and run my stick along the public railings and make up for the sobriety of my youth. I shall go out in my slippers in the rain and pick flowers in other people's gardens and learn to spit. You can wear terrible shirts and grow more fat and eat 3 pounds of sausages at a go, or only bread and pickles for a week, and hoard pens and pencils and beer mats and things in boxes. But now we must have clothes that keep us dry and pay our rent and not swear in the street and set a good example for the children. We must have friends to dinner and read the papers. But maybe I ought to practice a little now, so people who know me are not too shocked and surprised when suddenly I am old and start to wear purple. That is Jenny Jacobs. We have two fine readers reading with us tonight, Carol Levin and Annette Spalding-Convey. Carol will read first, and this is a little bit about her. She's published 2 full volumes of poetry, Confident Music Would Fly Us to Paradise, and you have that here, from Moonpath Press, which is a wonderful new local press, and also Stunned by the Velocity from Pekin Grove Press from a few years ago. She also has 2 chapbooks, Red Rooms and Others, also from Pekin Grove, and Sea Lions Sing Scat from Finishing Line Press. Recent poems appear in the Tampa Review, For Culture Poetry on Buses. My poem is coming up in a few weeks on the website. String Poet and Floating Bridge Review. Her work has been widely published in journals and anthologies, in print and online, in Russia, New Zealand, and the United States. She's an editorial assistant at Crab Creek Review and teaches the Breathing Lab Alexander Technique in Seattle. Very pleased to have Carol Levin with us today.
Is that gonna, that's too high, Michael. Can you help? Thank you. Perfect, okay. Thank you, Michael Dillon Welch and Soul Food, and all of you who have come. As I was writing this book, I was weaving together 3 themes. The first one was the tension between silence and voice. The next one was familial relationships. And then the juxtaposition between the fantasy of standing on an opera stage and then daily life, and then knowing which was which. And you don't need to know anything about opera if you want to read the book, but the theme the opera theme was inspired by the almost 20 years I was in Seattle Opera. Cast as a supernumerary is a person who is a silent character in the opera. And all these poems are strung together on a through line of music. Recently, I noticed that there are a lot of poems in this book that refer to transformation in one way or another. And I began to think of us. Each of us in this space has a story. And within our stories of our lives, we've experienced a transformation at some time or another. So I've chosen some of the poems just totally at random. If you do happen to read the book, I recommend you read it first page to last, because poets spend a lot of time putting the poems in order so that they'll hold hands with each other. Page 38. And fate nestles among the chorus. And there's an epigraph by Wallace Stevens, and he says, I am my world. I live on stage in the character's circumstances, surrounded by air, just air, articulating within human instruments. Sound waves bounce, dominating acoustic cavities. The frequencies of each voice's 3,000 hertz undulate harmonic motion. Isn't that remarkable? Resonance, articulation, flexibility, and vibrato. We don't need to know the position of the tongue, the loosening and tightening of the vocal folds, the exertion of the muscular thrust. I am a receptacle being vibrated, my system changed, circulation exalted. Life for this moment is electrified sensation, not at all like dying. It is magic standing on the opera stage looking out at 3,000 seats and an orchestra below and surrounded by the chorus, all of us costumed, becoming part ourselves and part another person, the character. All together, all of this is the result of hours and hours of hard work, a time of tiny terrors. Remain in readiness, hours of waiting. Wait your turn until something happens. Loiter, linger, twiddle thumbs, hang fire to mark time. Be ready to be ready. No whistling backstage. Delay, interlude, intermission, on break. A point in the journey where one continues to pause. Hesitation heightens drama. The call. Stage manager points. Places, please. Ready? Go. Birthing. Catch it. My butterflies thought go would paralyze. When we think back to stare on both sides, our image is reversed as we fly into lights, inferno, ablaze, life force, creatures of the stage. And 65. This poem is a reference to Wagner's opera Tannhäuser. Now, Tannhäuser was a knight in love with Elizabeth, and Elizabeth was pure. Tannhäuser begins Act 1, and he's down below making love and cavorting with Venus in conflict to his other life as an upstanding nobleman. So it's the struggle between the sacred and the profane. Now, I was cast in this opera, and I was standing on a set that was very high at the opening of the opera. And I was above Tannhäuser, who was down there doing you-know-what. Above and below Tannhäuser's proscenium precipice. While counting my entrance cue, perched far above Tannhäuser, who thrills in unholy embraces in Venusberg below, I puzzle over life's seasons and the way cold temperatures mean bad news for blossoms. My life began like an old coat buttoned tight over a flowered dress of soft silk charmeuse. Now the base of my spine quivers with Wagner's lush opening themes. I'm devoured by crescendos, forcing heat to rise in shock waves when Tannhäuser seeks absolution in the first act as he collides, bedeviled by opposing delights. From this height, I muse on questions of life's progression. Some say it's a gene that senses timing is right for blossoms to open. None of us knows for sure when flowers will bloom, constrained by too cool nights, too little rain, or a dearth of lullabies. Maybe it was my family trading blows in the first act of my birth, or maybe just a gene caused me to silently flunk ABCs and never master numbers. It may have been the slow grind uphill. Blossoms of late bloomers' blossoms are brilliant. I'm a grace waiting for a cue, swirling in gut feelings of nature, seated to my old life, adorned in diaphanous tulle, luminescent in the harmony of a woodwind choir and the brass offstage. I descend toward Venusberg's orgies when violins and cellos catch air to billow my veils. Measure by measure, I meet two other graces, manifest as a motif under accent lights, flooding us in beams of spring. We're goddesses of charm, beauty, and creativity. Silent, of course, like any painting. Our fingertips touch, we endure the entire act, balancing a world's fatigue on the open petal pattern of our lifted arms. Eloquence. If you refrain speaking for yourself, speaking your mind in tongues, speaking out, volumes, speaking frankly, do you sing instead? No, you dance. Robert Davidson, the dancer, taught dance at the University of Washington, and he taught his dancers to dance on trapezes. And Robert Davidson, trapeze dancer. You fly, and I am you. Your right hand locks on your trapeze. Mine curls, tight in my pocket. Like heartbeats from stage right, drums and flutes, you fly, buoyed in blue air. I know how it feels to die. Stage light strobes your eyes, flashing cellophane stars, extruding a limb of light to me. I look out through your eyes, magnetized. I am you. We are a jaguar, swooping. We levitate silently from prehistoric tar pits of ordinary life to dance a pas de deux, and I am you. Until you smile in the bow light, embracing applause, my hands sting, widow of feats of association. And for a change of subject, destiny's obbligato perseveres. Oh, destiny, your rhythmic formula's airborne, bearded and undulating above me. The day the moving van from Minnesota loses its way. Destiny, thank goodness you are fated to persevere under muggy skies. In awe I look up, unaware you signal me in a mysterious leitmotif as I see the mountains out. I walk to Dick's Drive-In to find a phone to call for the key. My family, bored, sticky, in hot shirts and shorts, wait. Oh, destiny, you must have been waiting nearby, savoring the 7 years that passed until we would meet. That day, airing out the humidity, you probably opened hatches and attached lifelines, sailing your boat through the Ballard locks. Fate and destiny were destined to be lovers. So they threw me a curve. The family moved in, then out. Children followed their passions. Their father followed who knows what, leaving me with the house key, open doors, empty rooms, and an outcome unknown. Did you and I brush shoulders in Belltown's noon crowd? Was I looking down, adding the tip to my tab when we sat next to each other on stools at the Pike Place Fish and Chips? Oh, destiny, you knew. Probably after one rainy Sunday, we were destined to pull up side by side at the Pink Elephant Car Wash on Denny and 6th. Unknowing, though fated, do you think if you'd have seen me, you'd have walked into a lamppost or fallen on your face, predestined to step from the curb, tripped up, the way Beethoven's motif in his fifth induces a vortex in the obbligato of fate? Before fate became our tune, I welcomed you, spiraling in awe toward the dazzle of my irresistible smile. And the last poem I'm going to read Supernumerary. This is a prose poem. The best thing about being a super is that the voice is banished. Eye on the conductor, alert to the orchestra. The super's voiceless character on stage exists in make-believe. At the climax ovation, bravos are received for the stars' sublime singing, continuing to glow even after stars depart and I emerge from the back corner and bow. I don't leave. I won't leave. I stay on stage, triumphant, subsumed by warm swells of vibrations molecules still spilling along the opera house walls, bouncing against balconies and chandeliers, flying to the stage from the audience's empty red seats. Echoes of adulation gush over me after they all retire. Stage manager, conductor, musicians, chorus, principals, electricians, prop crew, makeup and costumers. After stagehands sweep up and stow the full moon in the flies, the lights flick out, door locks click. Celestially lit in hurdy-gurdy enchantment, I grow taller, standing, feet apart, on the proscenium, arms raised sky high, seeing everything, just me. Here I stand, still. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. What a thrill to perform in front of thousands of people like that. Our next reader is Annette Spalding Convey. She is a poet and editor in the Seattle area. Her full-length collection, In Broken Latin, was published by the University of Arkansas Press and was a finalist for the Miller-Williams Poetry Prize. Her chapbook, In the Convent, We Become Clouds, won the Floating Bridge Press Chapbook Award and was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. She was chosen for the Jack Straw Writers Program, an excellent program, and as a recipient of an Artist Trust Gap Grant and an Artist Trust Fellowship Award. She is a co-founder and co-editor of Two Sylvias Press, another wonderful local press, and is the past co-editor of the literary journal Crab Creek Review. Please welcome Annette.
There, I think that's good, right? Can you hear me? So thank you to SoulFood Books and to Michael for hosting our reading this evening. And I'm really delighted to be reading with my poet friend, Carol. And we met when we were both on the staff of Crab Creek Review. And tonight I'll be sharing some poems from my book, In Broken Latin, which is about the 5 years I spent as a Roman Catholic nun in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And I'll also be reading a few poems from a new collection that I'm working on. So the first two poems that I'll be reading were both inspired in part by Mother Teresa. Now, it was kind of an interesting story to me that as Mother Teresa was dying, she absolutely begged that all of her letters and journals be destroyed because she didn't want anyone to know the extent to which she had really questioned her vocation and the existence of God. So right after she dies, what does the first thing the Catholic Church, what do they do? They publish everything in like 31 languages. So I've chosen this first poem because it talks about Mother Teresa and it's also about Halloween, so it's seasonal. This poem is called Hollow Women. And it begins with this quote from one of Mother Teresa's letters. My smile is a cloak that covers everything. I speak as if my very heart is in love with God. What hypocrisy. Hollow women. Don't feel sorry for us. Medicate us. Don't meditate on us with rainbow energy. Don't call Child Protective Services. Assume my husband isn't getting any. Don't bring me a week's worth of zucchini lasagna. Believe me, I keep discovering my house is not a convent, and this kitchen not a chapel. There isn't a room where the paring knife hole in my side can bleed its nothing. Bleed its nothing without interruption. Just give me Halloween, one black and white nun costume to trick even Jesus, a loaf of pan de muerto to feed the thin-cratered moon. Give me All Hallows Eve, an orange vegetable metaphor with a silver spoon. Scooped and emptied, I'm wrapping every damn seed that tangles me in yesterday's newspaper, chicken feed. Let me mourn when nobody's died. I swear it's less like navel-gazing and more like the black hole of my gut, my white cell Pleiades, spinning in the part of the painting the artist leaves blank. And don't let hollow women burn their brooding letters like straw. Remind them, sometimes even saints suck it up and grin. Summon grace from a God-empty breast. And the next poem I'm going to read was also inspired by Mother Teresa. And I was fortunate enough to meet her very briefly in San Francisco when she was setting up a convent of her sisters there. And I was able to get my picture taken with her, and I was so amazed because she was like this little fireball of energy. But when I had my picture taken with her, she was like this tall. Like she barely came up to my chest. That was amazing to me. And so I decided to Google her today because I've kind of been out of touch with, aside from Pope Francis, like, well, what's the Catholic Church doing? And I wondered if she'd been made a saint. So I came across several articles from Huffington Post, and one said, Mother Teresa's sainthood in 2016. And then another one said, Vatican denies imminent sainthood in 2016 for Mother Teresa. So I figure if the Vatican denies it, it's probably going to happen. So the poem I'm about to read does make reference to Mother Teresa, and it also references a story that some of you may remember from the 1980s, and that was when Archbishop Oscar Romero was murdered in El Salvador, as were 3 Maryknoll nuns and a Catholic lay worker. And, unfortunately, the 4 of them were kidnapped and raped and murdered. And this poem is called Wearing a Scarf of Recycled Sari Yarn, I Want Other Gods. It pours over my white habit like a tropical cocktail. So many lemons, mangoes. Even my mea culpas are strawberry. In the refectory window, the reflection of my veil becomes black hair. And I touch the extra bead on my rosary, the vanity I haven't prayed away. I will only go so far with Jesus, won't undress completely. I'm like a mistress he visits in another town who perfumes his tired feet, listens to his miracles. I'm not one of his wives, washing lepers in Calcutta, raped in El Salvador. It's okay being lukewarm. The morning I met Mother Teresa, I tried to pull a thread from the blue trim of her sari, and I swear my hand burned for days. And this next poem was a little bit of an experiment in stream of consciousness. And I was reading the newspaper, and several stories inspired me at once. And I decided, let me see if I can write a poem where I bring and thread all of these, diverse stories. So the first one was the story broke about how the government was waterboarding terror suspects. And I don't know if you know what waterboarding is, but that's when people who are being interrogated are actually dunked underwater until they almost drown, and then they're brought back up and revived. And that is done continuously until they, come forth with the information. And the other story that broke was about 3 Catholic nuns who were put in jail for protesting nuclear weapons. And they had cut a fence and had walked into a Minuteman II missile silo and had poured some of their vials of their own blood onto the silos. And they were put in prison. And they ended up in prison with a very notable celebrity who was also in trouble. And this poem is called Sunday Afternoon Waterboarding. And it begins with a quote. "We do not torture." George W. Bush, defending U.S. interrogation practices in CIA prisons overseas. "I'm not thinking sports here, surf and boogie, beach blanket bingo, or Frankie Avalon betting someone in the perfect sand. But I'm thinking strapped naked to a plank and dunked in a tub until you black out. I'm saying don't worry. You'll be resuscitated with little or no lung damage, maybe a smidgen of oxygen brain deprivation so they can collect some information that will save us all. Amen." Thank God when I was in the convent, they didn't think of us as witches. But I thought of us as witches, white for sure, praying spells for my mother's elaborate tumor, tarot cards veiled under my black veil in the closet, since my life was all cups, blood, water, wine. I was taught to hold everything in my nun's big mother heart. Lord knows if there's any martyring to be done, call the nuns who bled themselves on that nuclear silo and ended up in jail with Martha Stewart, not so much for bleeding as cutting the military's metal fence, an offense as big as national defense. I'm saying, don't worry. We aren't Salem or the Middle Ages. We'd never let a waterboarded Martha come home to Turkey Hill, Connecticut, too terrified to sip Perrier, scared so silly she can't cut her parsley when it rains. And this next poem was inspired by a very cute but grouchy nun that I lived with right before I left the convent, and her name was Sister Claire. And as a young nun, I had to go through yearly evaluations where everybody in the convent got a chance to write out and then share with me all of my strengths and weaknesses. So that was very fun. And I was really surprised. So when Sister Claire started, telling me all my weaknesses, the main one was she did not like the way I walked. And she said I just stomped around the convent. And she could not believe that because when she was a young nun, everybody glided. And she's like, I can't believe you haven't been taught how to glide. So this was really strange, but I normally don't lie or say mean things to people, but it's just out of my mouth came this complete lie. And I said, Sister Claire, I contracted a virus as a baby, and it made me unable to walk until I was 5 years old. I just thank God every day that I can stand up. So she looked really horrified and then apologized for saying that I stomped around. So this poem is called, In the Convent, We Become Clouds. I lived with women who didn't move their hips, but slid like mist through hallways and chapels. Their curves drowned in a habit's straight white sea. When one of them said, You walk like a lumberjack, I wondered why I hadn't learned to float. My black pumps still causing this body to shake and surface. Say woman during silent prayer. There are things we can't offer up. Breasts, lips, voice, swung like an ancient axe. The way we receive communion on our wet tongues. so that even the oldest priest will blush. So I'm now going to change gears a bit and read a couple of poems from the new collection that I'm working on. And these are inspired by some heavy-duty genealogy. And I don't know if any of you have gotten into genealogy, but it can be really addicting, and you can find out some really fascinating things. So I started working on my mother's side of the family, and specifically my matrilineal line. And so your matrilineal line is like your mother's mother's mother, and it just goes back through all of your, mothers and great-great-great-great-great-grandmothers. And so the poem was specifically inspired by the type of DNA that is only handed down by a mother to her daughter, and then only daughters pass it on. And it's called mitochondrial DNA. And I was sort of amused that as I was researching it, and this was according to scientific explanations, it was described as the kitchen of the cell. So mitochondrial DNA cooks sugars and then feeds everybody else. And I thought, oh my gosh, even on a biological level, us women are put in the kitchen and responsible for feeding things. So this is called mitochondrial Eve. And it begins with a little explanation of mitochondrial Eve. She is the woman who is the matrilineal, most recent common ancestor for all living humans. Passed down from mother to daughter, all mitochondrial DNA in every living person is directly descended from mitochondrial Eve. It's fitting, isn't it? She's ragged red thread in the kitchen of the cell, boiling up another batch of sugars to spoon feed those protons. They're tiny intake tubes in a gotta have O. She bumps her 4-fatty acid ass on the side of the table and despises being called lipid flipper, bioblaster, especially MAM, mitochondria-associated membrane. It's bad enough her one-way ticket here was riding in the smoking hot tail of a sperm. Sometimes she remembers her fling with Y-chromosomal Adam, that genetic drifter. Too much baggage and generations of junk DNA. If only he'd sort through the contents of his genes once in a while. It's all about sex and raw and nothing genteel, just the percent of himself he shares with chimps. Take some advice. Don't get this Eve in a snit or there'll be dystrophies, paralyses, crazies, and one wrong turn trafficking sugars, diabetes. Push her too far and she'll leak your elastic electrons in spite of every cold cream or bee-bomb. And please, never say her name when you're trying to call up your mother's mother. She'll bustle them all into your kitchen, ask you to serve apple pie to each MNU, maiden name unknown. At the table, they'll be tangling themselves in your apron strings until you answer every mother-loaded question. The worries that keep them from their beauty sleep, pacing and pacing the tired wood floor of your bones. So on one level, I'm really excited about all the genealogical research I've done, but my family is mortified, and they're really mortified that I'm writing about it. And the thing that I find most inspiring really are those amazing skeletons that I've been able to find in the closet. And in this new collection, I have an entire section that's dedicated to my great-great-aunt Stella. And the story that was passed down in our family was that, poor great-great-aunt Stella had died as an infant of diphtheria. And there was even like this little place on a hill above the family homestead. That's where baby Stella's buried. And so I started doing research, and I found baby Stella. And she was 45 years old in 1925, and she was a patient, or what they were called then, an inmate at Sonoma State Home, which was also called California Home for the Feeble-Minded. So I did a lot of research on Stella and on the institution where she lived, and I've written a whole series of poems in her voice. And this is one of them called New Intern, Ward C, California Home for the Feeble-Minded, Sonoma, 1920. He's all the thoughts that stuff a loony's pillow, lobotomies and laundry, soft-boiled eggs and a cold, cold tub of hydrotherapy. When he presses the mustard poultice to my soul, my uncontrollables spin above the windowsill's iron-tight bars. Yes, he loves to measure my neck, my face, my mind into half-sleep. On convulsive days, I'm cuffed. On steady days, I bleach sheets. Sometimes he's the bearded iris and I'm the vase, stained glassed in every bit as black and blue as a Sunday veil. I eat his tonics with jam and biscuit and a slice of constraint. Still, I'm not completely well. Should I tell him my mother's mind became a juniper coffin she crawled into for years without hope or calendars? No, don't tell. When he ties me to the chair that vibrates, I'm a silent movie with white cheeks and a black mouth. My bad, bad words filling the frame between scenes. And the last poem I'm going to read is another one from this genealogical collection, and it's about my maternal grandmother, Carrie Potter Criss. And she died well before I was born, and like many people who die in their prime, she's sort of taken on a saint-like status in our family. And even like Elvis, there's rumors about her appearing. So it was November of 1946. And it was a few days before Thanksgiving, and suddenly she got a whim to go see a movie. And my mother recalls the movie being Mildred Pierce, which was the movie that Joan Crawford won an Academy Award for. And it's a film noir piece, and this poem employs a lot of film noir imagery and themes. And even the title is taken from two other 1940s film noir movies. So it's called The Reckless Moment, or Bury Me Dead. And it's for Carrie Potter Criss, 1902 to 1946. It's a classic drama car crush. Nothing more than streetlight lighting, a Plymouth and DeSoto, and it's snowing and snowing and snowing. She puts up plum jam all afternoon, and a potboiler picture show sounds delicious. No matter how it ends, everyone in the audience family will cry, and cry, for years. Amnesia is fairly epidemic, but this is shot through their brains forever. With a handkerchief, they wipe spatter and grieving from windshield and teary eye. Cut. Do you like film noir? Weepers? Sure, think Mildred Pierce. Flashback popcorn with circles of butter, drink oranges and cream, and melodrama it with a salt shake of foreshadow. Do you think Joan's been looking hopeless from not enough crazy? Lemon vodka shoulder pads, ankle strap stiletto F-me pumps? Oh, in bed with the fever fans, accept this Oscar for you fans. Oh, and oh. Sure, think Mildred Pierce. Roll it. She went out in a heavy snowing after putting up plum jam all afternoon and looking for a good weeper. Enter a South DeSoto through her windshield. And all those picture shows she used to know kept rolling. Smoked cigarettes, slapped daughters, were private eyeing. They didn't give an alienated existential damn. But her audience family was tear-jerked. It was a 2, maybe 3 hanky ending. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. That inspires me. Maybe I should check out Ancestry.com or some of those sites. My family is all from England, so I don't know how much they'd have here domestically, but we'll check it out. And it's obviously a rich source for poetic inspiration. And I'm sure there's a lot more where that came from, too, so thank you. A couple of announcements. Well, first of all, if you haven't yet signed up on our open mic, it's right down here. And the question of the month is, what is your favorite musical instrument? Also, I'd like to invite you to our next reading here at SoulFood. It's coming up on Thursday, November 19, so just before the week before Thanksgiving. And it will feature J.L. Kleinberg and Luther Allen, both from Bellingham. Judy Kleinberg writes a wonderful, very newsy poetry blog that I love getting. It's one of my favorite blogs, and I love to subscribe to it. And Luther Allen is a poet also in the Bellingham area, and I'm glad they're making the trek down here. So that's Thursday, November 19. And I'd also like to invite you to the next reading of the Redmond Association of Spoken Word, which is coming up on October 30 and features Jason Zions, who's a wonderful storyteller and poet, and he usually memorizes his work and has a very dramatic presentation. So check that out at the Old Redmond Schoolhouse Community Center here in Redmond, and that's on Friday, October 30. So there may be a Halloween theme, I'm not sure. It's now time for a break. 30th. Did I say third? 30th. 30th, yes. Not a year from now. So thank you. So it's time to take a break. Get something to drink or eat if you haven't already. And we'll get started again in a few minutes. Thanks again to Carol and Annette.